Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. I'm David Shaw, the Publishing Director for Family Business Magazine. I hope that you and your family members are all well and enjoying the start to summertime. Today, we're going to talk about something every family business owner, and really every citizen, can put to use, which is how to speak up and be heard by the people who make our laws. Advocating for the policies that affect your business, your family, and your community takes more than passion. It takes preparation and the right communication skills and strong, lasting relationships with the people who are in office. We have three guests today who have sat on every side of that table as a lawmaker, as senior congressional staff, and as advocates for family businesses. So this should be a practical and takeaway-filled webinar. Before we get started, some housekeeping details. If you have not joined our webinars in the past, there will be time for questions. You can make comments as well. Just use the Ask a Question bar that you see below the slide. We'll go for no more than 60 minutes today and get to as many comments and questions as we can. I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. First is Ed Royce. Ed represented Southern California in the U.S. House of Representatives for 26 years, where he chaired the House Foreign Affairs Committee and served as a senior member of the Financial Services Committee. Today, he is Principal of Public Policy at the Brownstein firm. Russ Sullivan is chair of the National Tax Policy Group at Brownstein. He's a Capitol Hill veteran who spent 14 years with the Senate Finance Committee, including 9 years as its staff director. And last but not least is Pat Soldano, who's president of Family Enterprise USA and of the Policy and Taxation Group. She spent more than 30 years advocating on behalf of family businesses, family offices, and the families they serve. And I'm proud to call her a friend. So welcome all three of you. First up, this is a big topic for family businesses to learn how to do these kinds of things. So first for you, Mr. Royce, you served as a member of the House for 26 years. Contextualize for us the importance of citizen advocacy.
Well, I think the basic concept of the republic here is based on the idea of giving everybody a voice and giving everybody a right to be heard, right, in the system. You're heard through your vote, but just as importantly, if there's legislation that's going to affect you, you have that right and in a way, maybe even under our system, the responsibility of trying to argue your point in a way in which your representative hears you. And one way to do that is through the advocacy in which you engage members of the House or Senate or, at least their staff who are actually writing these bills, and explain precisely how that legislation would affect you and those and would affect and have other consequences that perhaps they haven't thought through. Perhaps the author of that legislation has been given a bill without the input and balance. And so part of the process is to encourage that balance of allowing those who are out there in the business community or the wider world doing their work, their job, to go in and petition and tell those in a position of authority, have you thought about these effects? Have you considered other consequences that might come from this? And by the way, the whole concept here is that you all have the right to do this because you're all part of this country, right? Every citizen has that right. And it's a very empowering thing to do. I think for people who have done it, they've noticed that, they feel better about the fact that they haven't slept on their rights. Instead, they've stepped forward, laid out their argument about how this would affect them adversely. And I think that's part of our system, is to encourage people to do that. At least that was Thomas Jefferson's view of it. And I think it's still our view today. Let's have an educated citizenry where everyone has an education, but part of that is a civics education that tells you go out and state your case, state your mind, That's the most important element of our system.
Okay. Well, from Jefferson to Lincoln, people used to be able to just walk into the White House. Russ, how can't walk into the White House these days without an invitation and some security checks. But how should family members think about getting started in reaching out to their representatives? What's the door opener?
Yeah, David, I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And I think I'm aware of at least two major tracks here. Some citizens really want their voice to be heard. They just want to tell the member whether he or she should vote for or against a bill that's coming up in the House or the Senate that week. And so for a lot of those people, sending a letter or leaving a message at the front desk of the member's office in Washington, D.C., that may be sufficient. And maybe they don't want to hear from the member.
Right.
I would say our civic system here also gives the opportunity for the member to talk to the constituent as well and explain, well, why is Congress considering this? Or why am I leaning toward voting against this or voting for this or amending it, where there can be that engagement? If you want that kind of engagement, I still think email is currently the standard for getting an audience. Asking for a meeting with your member, or if the member's not available, asking for a meeting with a staff member. And I think that can be true both in Washington, D.C. and in the member's district office. Maybe Ed could tell us how they set it up, but Pat and I work on that regularly, where she approaches and deals with California members in their district offices, but I sort of deal with them in Washington, D.C. I think calls work better if time is short, like if a vote is coming up soon or you need to kill a bill or something like that. A letter rarely works to promote engagement in my history on Capitol Hill. Sometimes it does, but mostly you send in a letter, you're going to get a response of what the member's position is. But unless you specifically ask for a meeting and then follow up to get it some way else, you're probably not going to have that back and forth dialogue.
And all members' email addresses are listed on their websites, right? The way to reach out. Okay. So, Ed, if let's say somebody got a meeting with you, what would be the perfect meeting for you with a constituent? What makes it a worthwhile meeting for both parties?
I think it's worthwhile if you're concise, if you explain specifically why this affects you or your friends or your family or your community, if you put forward some arguments that maybe that member of Congress or key staff member hasn't thought about, ask that be relayed to the member if it's a staff member that you're talking to. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a meeting that you set up, although I think those are the most effective. But it can also be if you see that the member is coming to the Chamber of Commerce meeting or the Kiwanis or whatever, or having a town hall meeting, just going and getting in the front row and get yourself up there so that you can ask that question. All of these things, this methodology promotes an opportunity to lay out your line of argument. And as I say, be concise and to the point, and try to get a dialogue going. Have you considered this? Maybe as part of that meeting with a member of Congress or staff, you start asking questions as well. What about these side effects? Have they been considered? And I think all of that makes for a good meeting because maybe it draws them in to consider things that they haven't thought about.
Okay. Are there any, I don't know if there are any tips or tricks you'd recommend, Ed, for, when you've met with constituents, is there something that separates a great constituent meeting from one that you kind of tuned out on? I mean,
yes. If people come in and read points to you
Yeah.
I guarantee you it's awfully hard to concentrate to that type of circumstance. So you want to be comfortable enough with what you want to say. And frankly, just take the risk, even if you don't think you've got every talking point down. Just go in and speak your mind. That's always the best way to make a point.
Got it. Okay. Russ, how long should somebody expect to have with somebody like Mr. Royce when the meeting has been gotten? Ed said concise. What is concise?
Generally, I'd say 15 minutes. If you get a meeting with a member of Congress, you should plan to say what you want to say and even allow for some discussion with the member within a 15-minute period. It may be that he or she has longer than that and it can stretch out, but in general, that'd be the case. If your meetings with the staff, I think the standard is you can probably expect 25 minutes or close to 30 minutes. Staff generally schedule themselves sort of on the 30-minute block, but it's also fine to ask them, how long do we have, so, in order to make sure you're not making them late to something else. Nobody will be offended by a constituent saying, hey, how long do you have for me here? I want to make sure I keep you on time. They actually would appreciate that.
Okay. So a question for you as a former staffer, Russ. Let's say a family business meets with a staff legislative director, or what are the odds of the message making it to the member? What gets that message there?
Well, what gets the message there is a little bit of what Congressman Royce just said. If you speak with passion and respect, in other words, you have to know why you're there, and you have to describe it creatively. Look the member in the eye and tell them what's the problem or what's the opportunity and what you want them to do to represent you and why. Then the staffers will remember that and they will move it up. The people who come in and read from a script, again, are unlikely to have that message sent along. Let me tell you some of the ways that different offices that I've been in. I was privileged to work for 3 senators, and we had slightly different ways there. First of all, if you call to the main office in the district or in Washington, D.C., whoever you're talking to is writing down what you say. I can guarantee it. And they tally sort of what the constituents are saying that day. And at the end of the day, they generally send a report to at least the legislative director and to the senator, and maybe some other people. I'm not sure who Ed had report that to, but it is going to go in some information that is going to be reviewed. And I can assure you that members are actually interested in hearing the unfiltered, raw reaction to what's going on in the country and policy. And in fact, I worked for Senator Bob Graham of Florida for a while, and once a month, he would kind of surprise everyone. He would book an hour on his schedule, and he would just go take over at the front desk and actually answer the calls directly from Florida constituents. And, most people didn't believe it was actually him when he said, this is Bob Graham.
Yeah, I want to speak to the senator. This is he.
And they really freak out. But, he calmed them down, and it got to where he really did, get them to say what they were interested in. And it was that kind of raw feedback that those members really want. They really do crave it. And in fact, so much so that they really look forward to meetings with people who will tell them what's going on in their district, in the economy, in the school systems, and whatever is important to the person, because he's probably going to get some information he's not getting from anyone else.
Yeah.
About what's happening. Am I right or wrong, Ed?
You're right. And that's pretty creative too, to be on the front desk there and take a few calls. Yeah. And it does happen. People aren't in the office and the phone's ringing and you just pick it up. but the senator made a habit of it, and that's kind of impressive.
So, David, let me give you this. That was one kind of senator I worked for, but another one I worked for was Patrick Moynihan of New York. And Moynihan didn't enjoy the constituent meetings quite as much. What he loved was a well-written letter. So his direction to the legislative staff was, if you get a well-written letter, cogent and makes a point, I'd like to read that letter. So for him, we always picked out a few letters. Again, not a majority of the letters that came in, but the ones that really gave some information, were clear that they were from a constituent who cared about this, written in their own words, but sort of laid out a case for or against some policy. And we would send those on to him for his review and for reading. Then I had a third senator, Max Baucus, who he didn't really like either one of those. He didn't like reading, he didn't like getting on the phone. But if you were from Montana, you got a meeting with him if you wanted one. And that's easier to do for Montana, which has only 1 million people,
right,
rather than, 40 million or how many ever California has.
Yeah.
But, for the congressional districts, I'd be curious to what Ed's policy was too. Now, that didn't mean he met with them, for anyone from Montana, for 30 minutes. But he, sometimes I as a staffer or other staff members met on his behalf. But he was always, every time, every Montanan got invited to a weekly Montana breakfast that was hosted on Capitol Hill on Wednesday morning. And any Montanan could come to that, and they could get a few minutes with Max Baucus. So they might meet with the staff for 30, but they got to see him for 2 or 3 minutes at a breakfast that was for anyone from Montana. So you can see different members have different strategies, and your chances of getting it to the member depend on, are you willing to go to the breakfast on Wednesday morning when you're in Washington and see the senator? If so,
right,
you get your few minutes. If you're going to write in, you better have a really good letter if you want it to get to them. And if you're calling in, again, your chance is not that great, but certainly as part of a trend, you would be reported to the member.
Okay.
Yeah, we used to have open houses in both the LA portion of the district and then in the Orange County portion, where we would invite people from that area, those communities, to just come in. We'd send an invitation to everybody, and that was, I think, a good way to engage. And then we did these town hall meetings. So I think that all provides a forum. But
okay. Well, Pat, you're an expert in communicating with members here. How do you, and then how do you recommend families sort of navigate the different communications recipient styles? Not everyone's going to do letters like Moynihan. So what are your recommendations?
Well, I think all the advice, of course, that Congressman Royce and Ross Sullivan have given is excellent. I think what's important for family business owners to know is, you first of all, you have to do the meetings. And the calls are good, the emails are good. You can go on even our website or other websites, and we have calls to action. You can just click on that, put in your zip code, tells you even who your member of Congress is if you don't know. But you need to do the meetings, and everyone that does the meetings says just how much they enjoy it and how much they feel, as Congressman Royce says, they really make a difference. They do believe after the fact that they love it, and most people go back because it's such a great experience. But I think the difference is with family business owners, you have to make it personal. You have to give them your story, your family business story. You have to explain to them why your family business is important to them, how you affect your community, how you affect the whole economy, quite frankly, especially if you're a national business. And I also think, as they have both said, you have to be prepared. You have to know what you're going to say. You have to be articulate about it, and it has to have an ask. You can't go and do a meeting, and I've had people say, many staffers say, I get so frustrated when constituents come here and they have a meeting and they talk for 30 minutes and they don't tell me what they want. So you really have to decide ahead of time What are you there for? And what is your ask going to be? And then you have to really follow up to find out, okay, did you get a chance to talk to the member about it? It takes time. I get it. And did you get any input from me? And continue to go back. Russ and I have worked a long time together, and he knows it. And he tells me all the time, it takes 5-6 times sometimes before your issue is going to be in a place where the member can actually vote on it. So you have to keep it up. It's not a one-time thing. And I think the family businesses that do meetings, they learn that. And again, they usually like to go back.
Okay. So,
yeah, David, can I give a corollary to that? Pat is exactly right. And combining that with what Ed said at the beginning, if this is your member of Congress, if it's your representative or one of your 2 senators at the federal level, you go to them whenever you need them. That is their job to actually represent you, and you need to tell them exactly what you want them to do. If, however, you get referred to, or for somehow reason figure out that you've got to talk to the chairman of the committee that is drafting a bill. So maybe your senator, your representative is not even on the committee that the issue you care about is going to be, considered by. Then you may need to take the next step and go to the committee staff. In that case, you don't have a right to a meeting. Ed Royce is chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. He there's no way he could give a meeting to everyone in the world who would like to meet with him. You kind of have to earn that. In those cases, it's kind of nice to get in with a staffer in advance to sort of just introduce yourself. Here's who we are. Here's what we do. Here's what we produce, or here's who we hire. Here are the jobs that we provide. And to say, we'd like to be a resource to you if you ever wonder what impact the legislation you're considering is going to have on our industry, our community, our state. So on some of those, you do need to go in sometimes without an ask, but not if you're a constituent. If you're a constituent, you should have a very specific ask rate.
So, Congressman, what kind of asks work? Is it, vote this way? I'd love your support on X. What resonates, and what's the wrong ask?
Well, I think, you want to ask up front, but you want to phrase that in a way that explains why you feel that this is proper for you to be suggesting this course of action. And the reason it's proper is because presumably it's having an adverse effect upon you or your business or public policy in a way that you think hasn't been considered.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you can be respectful in making this case, but I would lay that out at the front end of the conversation, and I would be specific about the adverse consequences, if you're opposed to the policy. And at the same time, I'd also be mindful that if you don't get a meeting, let's say with the member of Congress, and they send you to talk to the staff, just be mindful of the fact that the staff are the ones that are writing the bills. And not only that, whether it's committee staff, as Russ was referencing, or the legislative director, or some particular subject matter expert that is working in the office of the congressman on those issues, that individual is the one who's not only doing the work and preparing legislation, but very likely the individual you're talking to is preparing for the member of Congress his suggestion of votes and why for the days when these bills or amendments come up. And I've seen how many members carry those onto the House floor with them and pull them out. The members didn't write those. The people that the voters or representatives in the district met with, those are the individuals who, sort of took stock in that, and also might make notes on that little note that they're passing on the committee vote that's coming up, or the floor vote, that says, we've had dozens of members of your community, come to talk to us about this issue in support or opposition or what have you. So regardless of how you measure it, getting that ask in is going to get translated one way or another in more cases than not
Okay.
to the member.
What?
So David, let me
Sure.
throw in an example here related to family businesses to help people frame it. If you're going in to say, member of Congress, you should just get rid of the death tax. Okay. That conversation you can have with the member of Congress, and you can have a good conversation. If, however, you're concerned about how certain laws affect grantor trusts or other, financial strategies to maximize the flexibility to give your family-owned business to the next generation and all those kind of things, you need to do what Pat Soldano was really good at, which is find the right staffer and talk to them. Because if you have a technical issue about science or, the climate or the tax code or a lot of different areas, in many cases, you'll be better off meeting with the staff and persuading them than talking to a member that doesn't want to invest the time to learn the subsections of the Clean Air Act.
Right.
Yeah, and I would add to that, David, that which Russ was so good at, is when you meet with those staff or the member, don't be afraid to say, and who else should I be talking to? Okay, maybe you don't have to just talk to your member of Congress. If you're trying to educate about a specific issue, I literally would go meet with Russ whenever he would have time to see me. And no matter how much time he had, I would take it. And I'd have a list with me and I'd say, here's kind of my target. What do you think? Do you think they're going to be receptive? Do you think I should talk to them? Is this a waste of my time? And he would help me with that. And any staff member, any member of Congress, if you ask that question, who else should I be talking to about this issue? They're going to help you. They want to help you.
I think that's true, Pat. If you start involving them and they get, you get a dialogue going with them and they start thinking about how they can be helpful to you, they can give you some very good advice, because as staff, they're paying attention to what's going on the Hill, specifically because this is the subject they cover. So, yes.
So what happens if your representative disagrees with your position and you know that? Is it worth trying to get the meeting? Is it worth trying to persuade?
Yes, it is, because, there's something in life called second thoughts. There's something in life called overdoing it or unforeseen consequences. And most members by now know that and have sort of seen that and seen public policy with maybe the best of intentions launched in different areas, and suddenly there's, a consequence to it. And so that's adverse. So it's good to kick around those ideas in advance of experiment, especially with those who have an inkling of some of the downside risks that we're undertaking with some rather dramatic policy changes, which would affect, let's say, human action or the likelihood of entrepreneurship or risk-taking, and instead might have an adverse impact on the very opportunities that we create in our society for upward social mobility and economic growth, right? And I think every member has a little bit of understanding that this is something that should be given more thought. So I'd stress the case for a second reason, and I think Russ alluded to it before. It's frankly, you're right to meet with your member of Congress in a sense, or at least the representative, or her or him. And I think I'd go ahead and avail yourself of that and say, okay, I know that the member isn't here, today to hear this, but here are the arguments I'd like you to share with him about, or her, about the adverse effects of this policy. I think all of that's worthwhile.
And I will say that we've done that. I mean, I've been amazed that we go into a meeting and we have a preconceived idea of the position of that staff member or member of Congress, and we've been wrong. And they really didn't hear the other side. They were willing to listen, and most of them are willing to listen, even if they have a preconceived opinion. And we've changed minds. And I think that's what you have to go in optimistic and tell your story and give your case and make a good case for it. And understand they may not support it 100%, but you can, as Congressman Royce just said, you can change minds.
Let me give you an example, David, from my time working for a senator from Montana. His general view was we should protect our national parks at all costs. No, don't let any business sort of creep in if you can. He was very big on that. But he once had a group of Montanans come in and explain to him the development pressures outside the national park and what was happening in the business community, what visitors and tourists who were from the state as well as around the country wanted to see. And they also came with an offer to broaden the side of a park in one direction. And they explained why it was very important to protect that area too. But the idea was to facilitate commerce and transportation in the areas that the American people were going to use to get to the park anyway. And they convinced him. And so he went in to eventually do a kind of a land swap piece of legislation to accommodate, the desires of really both aspects of the park, the conservation environmental part, as well as the tourist business part. And it worked. So you never know if you actually go in there with honesty, with respect, but also have the facts on your side because you know it, the community, the issue. Ed's right and Pat's right. They will listen, and sometimes you will influence actually what they do.
Okay. Well, let's talk about sort of we've had the meeting with the member. Is it important to leave anything behind at this point? A card, a handwritten note, a one pager? What do you end with?
I would do that note in my own handwriting and ask that be given to the senator or House member if you didn't get the meeting with the member. And in that note, I would make, my 3 points or whatever. And the importance of doing it in that way, I think, is because it is authentic. It is likely to be passed on. You've signed your name. Maybe you put your phone number down there in case the senator wants to call you about the issue. And I think it's going to get read. And I think, I think anybody who understands the issues will understand exactly how to lay that little argument in. So that would be, to me, I know that notes like that always got passed on. So
let me add to that. I agree with Ed. I'm not always as good at doing that as I should be, but I also think where you can, you want to leave a memory or some type of representation about who you are, what you're doing. So I always found some of the most effective meetings were where someone brought an employee with them. Particularly important for family-owned businesses, but that in the case I'm thinking, I was working for the Senator of Florida, and two parents brought in their teenagers, talked about the 529 college savings plan that they had for their children, and the children explained how this had influenced their commitment to go to college. That was a meeting with a memory because multiple people came in. The same could be true for family-owned businesses. Bring an employee of yours who's worked for you for 30 years, or maybe her mother worked for the company too before you got the job. And maybe your son is actually going to get a job at the company too. Those can be a way to make the meeting memorable. Also, if you have something tangible. I remember a company that came in that was trying to make clean hydrogen, and they started with natural gas and they separated the carbon, and so they brought in a pellet of what this sort of carbon looks like when they separate it, and they said, we sell this carbon to Goodyear and Continental, and they make tires out of it. So we end up with tires, American-made tires, and we end up with clean hydrogen that, when used for a fuel, doesn't limits the carbon emissions and climate change. And just having that pellet that they left with me helped me remember the meeting. So there's lots of creative ways to make sure that they get your point and remember you down the line as maybe legislation comes forward that contains the issue that you're concerned about.
And I
thought
add,
those were an excellent example.
I was going to add that don't forget the staff. Whenever I bring people to the Hill, I always make sure they have business cards, and remember to leave the business cards in the office, but also take the business card of whoever you met with, and the staff in particular, and send a follow-up email and thank that staff and remind the staff in the email, as Congressman Royce said, what are your bullet points? What did you cover very, very quickly? It's got to be a short email. And make sure that, again, you follow up with that staff member. So that it's critical that you have that card, so you have that contact information. And I think, to Russ's point, the stories are the most compelling part. I mean, we have so many statistics, economic statistics, but the fact is the stories are so important. As an example, we go in and we talk about how destructive the death tax, the estate tax is to family businesses. And we can give all the data in the world, but when they hear from one of our members who ran a business, who runs a business that makes aerospace parts, they have 380 employees. Her and her brother were running the business themselves. Her brother had a massive heart attack at 65 years old, passed away, and they owed $60 million in estate tax. When members of Congress or staff members say to me, do people really pay this tax? I mean, can't you just plan around this tax? That kind of story where they paid $60 million in tax. And as most family businesses aren't that liquid, they had to borrow, they had to negotiate with the IRS, they had to sell some stock, but they didn't lay off any employees. And that was really their intent. So when a staff member or member of Congress hears those kind of stories, it brings it back home and it makes it real.
I was thinking about the carbon pellet. Pat, have you ever encouraged family businesses to bring in samples of their output, their products? I mean, we have such an amazing array of food companies and candy companies, and all types of things.
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is absolutely. The problem now is security, because you can't bring anything in. So as an example, we have Little Debbie's cakes, right? And we wanted to bring samples. Well, we had to take the cakes out of the boxes and just bring the boxes in, right? Or we have Nielsen vanilla. Well, you can't leave the vanilla in the bottle, so you have to take the liquid out of the bottle. So because of the security, it's much, much harder today than it used to be.
It's not.
That's true in Washington. I'm not sure about the district offices. They may be a little looser.
Yeah, that's true.
But the alternative there, though, is if you're feeling good in the meeting and you feel like they are listening, one idea that I learned from Pat was invite them to your business. Invite them to come see you, the member or the staff, to come tour your vanilla manufacturing plant or whatever it is, your food processing facility. You'd be surprised about how many members are willing to actually do that, and they actually look forward to coming. Ed did that, I'm sure, because he actually wanted to meet all those workers and get their vote the next election. But he also probably appreciated sort of learning about what was going on in his district.
Definitely. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about timing, because I think that this is an important thing. It takes a long time to create a bill, get it passed, all of that. How much does timing matter in the ask process, in the meeting, and what you're asking for? I know you got to ask a number of times, but how does timing fit into this?
Timing.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Russ, do you want to go ahead, and then I'll add it.
Yeah, I'll give you one thing. If you have a big bill that's moving, that's complicated, you need to get in there as soon as you can. I was operating when I worked for Max Baucus under a rule that everybody asked for a meeting, got one at the finance committee. And so we got to where things were ramping up so much that a number of our staff members had to offer alternative times. We began doing meetings, from 7 to 8:30 a.m. before the day started in 15-minute segments. We even set up a Saturday meeting schedule to accommodate all the requests for meetings that is occurring. Most staffers don't want to do that, and members aren't around because they're back in the district over the weekend. But you have to be, the later you wait, the more you have to accommodate the fact that you're going to have to be quick, and you're going to have to be even more succinct because they got a bill to prepare for a markup. And so they're going to have limited time to meet with people. And at some point, they will cut off doing the meetings because it's 4 days or 3 days before the markup, and they have to negotiate among the members what's going to happen at the markup and make sure that the markup is successful. So earlier, the better. And, the later you go, the less time you're going to get. That's one component.
Yeah, that's just the logical reality that you want to engage all these issues still being discussed while there's still maybe amendments to change a direction or soften the blow. So the sooner that you engage, the more likely you are to get the meeting, and the more likely you are to be able to affect the outcome.
And so, David, like the people that we're advocating for now against the wealth tax in California, that election is not till November, but Pat and I have never been busier on an issue, months and months, even a year in advance. Once it became clear what was happening, you got to start early,
right?
If you really want to make a difference on a big, complicated issue where it may be the people of California making the decision, or it could be the state legislature, it could be both.
And legislation goes slow until it goes fast. I mean, what happens on the estate tax is we've worked years and years and years, and all of a sudden we're hitting December 1st, and Congress wants to get the legislation done. So all of a sudden, within days, it's up on the agenda and it's going to be voted on. And, we've had estate tax legislation pass 3 times in the month of December. So, but to Russ's point and Congressman Royce's point, you got to be there all the time. You got to be ahead of the game. You got to be ready, and you got to have new information and constant information, because you never know when it's going to happen. In many cases, sometimes you have a lot of warning, but many times you don't. So I just tell people, just keep at it, because it's going to happen, and you're going to be ready for it.
Excellent. There was a comment from an audience member who said, persistence, drip on the stone till you wear through.
I love that.
Yeah. So, Pat, advocacy can take years with no quick win, as you've mentioned. But how do you keep family business owners who are used to long-term horizons? How do you keep them engaged for this long haul?
Yeah, it is a challenge, but you really have to remind them that you do need to be persistent, that the laws are going to change in this country, and you want to be part of the solution. And in order to do that, you have to be constantly advancing the ball or playing offense, but you also have to keep what you already have achieved. And if you're not there working at keeping what you've achieved, it's going to go backwards. Yeah. And you never know which political party is going to be in control, which is why it's so critical to be bipartisan and to work with both parties. And again, continue to move the ball forward as much as you can. Again, on the estate tax. When I started going to Washington, D.C. and talking to people about the estate tax, The exemption was $650,000 and the rate was 55%. It's taken steps and way too long, but today the exemption is $15 million per person, double per couple with portability, and the rate's 40%. Now the tax is still around, doesn't generate a lot of revenue, but it's an issue that people point to. And so if we hadn't been there over these 30 years, we wouldn't have what we have today. And right now with the One Big Beautiful Bill, which was really helpful legislation for family businesses, we hear a lot that it's permanent. It's permanent until it isn't. As we, the next Congress, while it's not going to be easy, it's always the possibility that those wins could be lost. So again, you have to protect what you've won and you have to continue to educate and try and achieve better. So right now there's a bill in the House. It's a bipartisan bill, HR 601, that reduces the estate tax from 40% to 20%. To your point, David, it doesn't have a lot of traction right now. And this is the third time it's been introduced. But we have to keep working at it and trying to get sponsors, because at some point the timing will be right and we'll get a vote on it.
So a question, family businesses not only think for the long term, multi-generationality, but we have to deal with the next gen. And I wanted to start with Congressman Royce. What age, were people in their 30s getting meetings with you? Is there kind of an age gap problem in actually coming to meet a congressman? Are young people engaged? And if not, how would you get them so?
I think increasingly you do see more younger people getting engaged. But one of the things I will point out, and Russ alluded to it earlier, is many times you'll see someone in a family business, for example, bring their kids and bring their grandkids to a meeting, right? So one of the things that more experienced business people do is they bring their children in order to show children the system and what they're doing. And one of the things they generally know is what Pat was mentioning there, which is you don't want to have a situation where the taxes become confiscatory, and as a result, people are losing family businesses, losing family farms,
right,
and capital, and people aren't saving for the very reason. The grandpa says, well, why will I continue to work if we're not going to have for the family these opportunities to continue to expand, if all that's going to be taken away from us? So it's really to explain this basic human nature. And I think bringing younger people in is a very important point, because as Russ said, it is memorable. You can remember almost every occasion where somebody brought young people in. If those young people asked you any questions, you certainly you tend to really remember those. Now that you reflect on it, you say, wow, that was always impactful.
Not only that, but what was it, Pat? Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a good group of family businesses into the Capitol, and I think it was Congressman Hearn who was speaking, Kevin Hearn of Oklahoma, and one of the panelists had brought his two sons, who were elementary school age boys,
9 and 11.
Yeah. So they were sitting in the front row, and the member actually called them out. And what did he do? Asked them a question, I think.
Mm-hmm. He did.
So the member clearly noted the children there, and he was drawn to it. And he actually asked the kid a question from the podium in a room full of 50 people. So it just happened.
It's such a good reminder, right, Pat? It's a reminder of what this is about.
Right.
And it is about the future, and it's about their future. And they might as well be in the meeting. And for most of us, for a lot of people, we start working I started working at 14. To have young people understand that what their parents or grandparents are doing is such an integral part of life. But this is part of that process, right? The ability to come and talk to policymakers and talk about how that affects you and your family and your opportunities for the future and for business, to pull them in at an early age on something like that is something that they're going to remember all their lives, just as policymakers themselves will remember the questions from those young people. So I really encourage this. And David, I think that was a good question.
Yeah, and last night we had a women's business owner event, and Congresswoman Young Kim, who you know very well, came to the meeting, and one of our women business owners brought her 14-year-old daughter. And her 14-year-old daughter didn't say a lot, but she came up to me afterwards and she said, "I've just learned so much at this meeting. It was really enjoyable. And I've taken all of my 5 nephews and 2 nieces to DC when we were around 18 or so. And every one of them still tells me what an incredible experience it was that they'll never forget. Now I've started doing some of the great grandchildren. It really is. If parents would understand what an impact those meetings have on kids, they would all be doing it."
Excellent. So with FEUSA, Pat, are you working toward not just the children, but the rising gen? Are you getting more sort of the 30s and early 40s folk in?
We haven't been as successful as we'd like, David, but what we've learned is we can't go to them directly. We have to go through the parents.
Right.
And if the parents, just like I said, what happened last night, Bart Lamont is the one that brought his 11 and 9-year-old son. If the parents bring them, and these kids said the same thing, what an amazing experience, then we can get a nucleus of the next gen. So we're working on that. And again, we've got to drive it through the parents.
Got it. Okay. So here's a question that came in. It's related to the advocating with a member who may not agree with you, but this is within the family. What about a family business that really needs to work both sides of the aisle here, but there's a family member who holds a strong single aisle position? How can the family kind of broaden that person's perspective?
Most members of Congress have a pretty good sense of humor. There's always going to be somebody in the audience, maybe, who is, really a hard charger, and you can always handle that by saying, Granddad here, he's pretty opinionated about this. I hope you're ready for this, whatever. But I wouldn't be bashful about it. Let people be themselves, and but just remind them about their language and so forth. That's my only admonition on that front. I think everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But you can explain. The idea here is to get them to have second thoughts as members of Congress.
Right.
And if you're leading, with a punch, we may not get the opportunity to have them to reconsider their position. So I'd put it that way.
That's a great way of putting it. Pat, would you add to that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It happens a lot. And usually, as Ed said, the member of Congress is going to understand that. I think what's important as a constituent is respect your member of Congress. People in DC work incredibly hard, long, very, very long hours, and respect them and understand that they're there trying to work for you. And so be polite and also be respectful of their time and be courteous. And I still think you can have your opinions and you can express your opinions. But as he said, do it in a very thoughtful manner.
Excellent. Well, we're coming to, sorry, Russ.
Many times, David, that member may be distant from you in terms of position, but 2 months down the road, it may become clear that other members are working toward a compromise that's in the middle. And if that's the case, you do want that member to know the reason for the position you're advocating, because they may be able to latch on to a compromise that actually achieves your objective. And so it could be part of the key to getting them to vote for the compromise rather than voting against the compromise.
Got it. Yeah, you are dealing with human beings after all, right? You want to keep it clean, don't be a jerk, those kinds of things. So we're almost to the top of the hour. Key takeaway from each one of you, if you could. What's your advice to our audience of multi-generational family businesses? Congressman?
Yeah, just get the family involved, right? Because your wider family is going to learn a lot through this process, and get yourself involved in terms of your rights as an American to be part of the process and to have your say. and to get that meeting with with your Congress member or their representative. And frankly, I think that is the admonition I would give anyone, because these go to the quintessential values we have as Americans. We go to work, we build for our families, we want to maintain their opportunity to do that. But in order to do that, we also have to exert our rights under this system to be heard. And so that's what you're doing here, and you're also teaching your children and hopefully your grandchildren how to follow in your footsteps. That's the way I would look at it.
Yeah, and I would say just do it. People get intimidated, or they think I can't make a difference, and I would say start local. Okay, so go to a city council meeting, meet your mayor of your city, go to the Capitol in your state and work on state legislation, or at least be informed about it. Go to meet your state legislators as well as your federal legislators in their district offices. Send the email, make the phone call. I mean, you just have to do it. You have to start somewhere. You don't have to go right to DC to be effective. You can do it in your offices. And I would restate what Russ said about, if you're a family business, bringing the member of Congress to your shop, your office, your facility to meet your employees is so impactful. That's what we did last night with Representative Young Kim. We were at a woman business owner's business. And then we've also done that with Lou Correa, who's the co-chair of the Congressional Family Business Caucus. Again, he went to this aerospace industry that I was talking about earlier. He loved being there. He wanted a tour. He wanted to meet people. So that is very, very empowering as well.
My point, David, is kind of like Pat's. I suspect there are people on this call, and there certainly are many of them out of the family-owned business world who may be rolling their eyes a little bit, saying either, can I really make a difference, or I just don't want to become a target. Politics and all that is just, tough. I really don't want. I'd rather just stay below the radar. I encourage you to get above the radar. But if you're not going to do that, there are other creative ways you can maneuver. Figure out who else can influence this member of Congress besides you. Who did she go to school with? What kind of business was she in before she got elected to Congress? Did she have a business associate? What about their former staff? They have a former staff member who you're friends with who can convey the message for you. Can you support them in their campaign? Do you know the governor well, or a local official like Pat was talking, where they can carry the message to you? Or you just ask for a private one-on-one meeting, a dinner with a member of Congress. Then you don't have to be in front of everybody, right? But you have the chance to make the connection and to make your points. There's lots of different ways to do it.
Fantastic. A comment came through which reflects my view. Absolutely fantastic session. Every speaker was very high value. Thank you. And I would second that. I would also recommend to all of our viewers, if you're not a member of Family Enterprise USA, you probably should be, and you can reach out to Pat to learn more about how to do that. I thank all three of you for your incredibly valuable time here today. And maybe we'll be able to do this again sometime. But with that, I'd like to wish everyone a great and wonderful beginning of summer. We are going to close this off. If you're doing family office stuff, join us at our Align conference in September, where it's going to be hot in Dallas. And otherwise, I wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you all.